Thieves escaped with little more than pizzas when they forced their way inside this canteen during the school holidays, but they've left behind problems that could take quite some time to fix. Asbestos sheeting was smashed during the robbery, forcing the closure of the canteen at Cessnock West Public School, which serves around 200 students every day.
They're only hurting their own community.
Volunteers have been forced to set up shop in the staff kitchen using very basic facilities. That means there'll be no chicken nuggets or burgers on the menu for at least another week while the canteen area is secured and repaired.
They were testing the air over a couple of days, and then they will send in some specialists to remove the asbestos.
The setback comes as the school prepares for the construction of a new library to replace one that was destroyed by fire in July last year, causing $1.5 million in damage. 2 teenagers charged over the incident will have their convictions appealed in East Maitland District Court next week. The boys were given 12 months suspended sentences in December. Colleen West, NBN News.
Michelle Willard was convicted by an 8-woman 4-man jury in Newcastle last week for the murder of her husband at their Muswellbrook home in February 2003. Michael Willard had been shot in the head in what Justice Anthony Wheely described as a cruel and callous killing. Justice Wheely concluded that Michelle Willard was the person who organised the contract murder in the prospect of receiving over $200,000 from insurance claims for the accidental death of her husband. A second woman and a teenage boy who were actually involved in the killing are already serving 16.5 years jail. In delivering Michelle Willard's sentence, Justice Wheely concluded the standard non-parole sentence of 20 years for the offence of murder was insufficient. He ordered she serve a maximum sentence of 36 years with a non-parole period of 26 years. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Dr Scott Parazinski had his feet firmly planted in Maitland today, a civic reception at the local council chambers a world apart from his day job. The 43-year-old father of 2 is a veteran of 4 NASA space flights and will make his 5th next year to continue construction of the International Space Station.
My father worked on the Apollo program as a young boy, and so I always had these images of one day traveling in space and just never lost sight of my goals and my dreams.
The medical practitioner, who in his spare time enjoys mountaineering, scuba diving, skiing and woodworking, also happens to have a commercial pilot's licence. It's this hunger for experience and success he's hoping will be contagious with students in the Hunter, taking them to greater heights.
The future is very, very bright for those who understand the language of the future, which is going to be science.
Colleen West, NBN News.
An Olympian and Socceroo mainstay for several years, Ned Zelic has long been regarded as one of the country's best soccer exports, given that he's played much of his career overseas. Now aged 33, he's returning home to join the Jets for the first ever A-League season. The deal was struck after Zelic gained a release from his club in Austria, but he's expected to join his new club in just a matter of days. Given there's only 9 of them left until the Jets play their first game, he won't have long to settle in. A gifted attacking midfielder, Zelic shot to fame when, as captain of the Olyroos, he scored twice to book Australia into the '92 Barcelona Olympics, finishing with this incredible extra-time strike. Playing a more defensive role these days, he'll be a welcome addition at Newcastle.
That position there, is an important position for us. It releases a couple of players to play in their preferred position.
There's no doubting Ante Milisic's place is up front. Last night he returned from a dose of the flu to spark the Jets in their final trial match. Stung by a loss to the young Socceroos at the weekend, the Jets looked much better against Sydney Olympic, a game they sealed late with another 2 goals. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
So we've completed stage 1 and 2, and I guess looking forward in the longer term to having a safe shared pathway all the way from Adamstown through to Belmont.
For a club that hasn't received much good news on the injury front of late, some positive signs today that much-needed troops are on the way back. Sidelined all season, Josh Perry has been getting through training okay, but a return to the real thing remains the question.
You sort of don't realise how much your wrist comes into play when you play until you've got a wrist injury. But I sort of tried to give it as much workout as I could today, and it hurt a little bit, but nothing that you can't sort of play with.
Training for the first time since surgery to repair a torn tear duct on Monday, Daniel Toller was still a sight for sore eyes today. But he could well be playing this Sunday, something no one thought possible last weekend.
I got cleared this morning at about 9:30. I was straight over here on the paddock, so I'm keen to play, but your sight's probably one of the, got to look after that.
Cleared of a foot fracture, Matthew Gidley handled today's going as well.
It's still sore and it's going to be sore for a while, but everyone's playing sore this time of year, so it's just a matter of, like the rest of the injuries, just managing them.
There's still a host of notables still missing, but with the likes of fullback David Siege to make his season debut this weekend in the lower grade, the tide may just be turning at Newcastle. A win on Sunday would be the real indicator though. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
With the price of petrol still sky high, many motorists are on the lookout for discount fuel offers. That's why major service stations are doing so well with their discount shopper dockets, which offer about 4 cents a litre off petrol. But that's been sending some independent service stations out of business.
I would estimate we lost about 40% of our business overnight when the 4 cents a litre came in, and it's been bloody hard to try and exist for the last 18 months.
Now independent service stations with the help of small local retailers are banding together to combat the big chains. The base warehouse at Wallsend is one of the first in the Hunter to offer these Beep loyalty cards. For every $25 a customer spends in the shop, they receive a $1 fuel discount card to be redeemed at any participating service station. Spend $100 and that's $4 off your next tank.
I think with the price of petrol presently, people are aware that they've got to get a discount wherever they can. Petrol is a big thing. People have to get to work, put petrol in the car, go out on the weekend. We can give them a discount.
11 local service stations are already participating in the Beep initiative, with another 50 small retailers expected to jump on board. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
If it wasn't for the volunteers of the Central Coast Wild Plant Rescue Service, these defenceless natives would be dead in a matter of weeks.
What we're doing, there's a roadway going in along here, and so we're digging up all the native plants along here and transplanting them down the road.
The bulldozers will come through here soon, wiping out the bush to make way for a housing development, and the team is saving about 1,000 natives from destruction and replanting them on median strips and roundabouts nearby. Wild Plant Rescue is a charity linked to a similar group in the Blue Mountains and will stop at nothing to save a tree.
Multi-million-dollar developments like this, but also we'll come and rescue plants from, someone's driveway. If they're putting in a driveway, there's going to be native plants in their backyard, like nothing's too big, nothing's too small. Anywhere there's plants, need to be rescued. That's what we do.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It's 8 a.m. The sun is shining, but the breeze is cool at Merewether Baths. Good enough reason for a heart starter, according to these guys, although you get the feeling they don't need an excuse. This is the Merewether Mackerel's Winter Swimming Club. All the fanfare is for the opening of their swim season. It's a 33-year tradition for the club, whose members range in age from 16 to 88.
It's 21 degrees in. That's not cold enough for the Merewether Mackerels. They like it even icier.
So swimmers do what they can to make it more comfortable. These boys are used to it. The Mackerels compete every Sunday throughout winter, with water temps falling as low as 9 degrees.
Any conditions, rain, hail or shine, and the colder the better.
And there's one question that just has to be asked.
Do you think these men are crazy?
It's a prerequisite to be in the club. You've got to be mad. So, yeah, all the guys are definitely certifiably insane.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
It's likening the parts of a body to the parts of a car. So men, they don't really present at clinics or GPs, but they love their vehicles.
You get the feeling the Baulkham Hills Bees in the green is a very passionate team indeed. And you can't help but feel sorry for their opposition in this afternoon's final, Sydney North beaten in straight sets as the Bees became queens of this tournament. In earlier rounds, there was never any doubt the Sydney Cedars in the blue and red wouldn't qualify for the men's final, but in this match they were pushed all the way. Baulkham Hills pulled off some great plays to force a draw. But with former Yugoslav rep Alex Želkic and Aussie junior Nathan Lovett, the Cedars were still the form team of the competition.
At 39 years of age, Bob Mirovic believes he's never felt better as a boxer. Still able to match it with fighters almost half his age, the multiple Australian heavyweight champion is chasing a world title in June on the Gold Coast.
I was 26 years of age when I started training for Seth Waters, and he told me, Bob, he said, you started late in life, he said, you'll be maybe early 40s before you hit your peak.
His preparation will be rounded out by 4 weeks with the controversial, yet experienced, Mike Tyson. Mirovic was actually meant to fight the former world champ, but when that bout was called off, the invitation to train with Iron Mike was extended and gratefully accepted.
So much more I can learn, and this month over America, being in the promotional team with Jeff Fennick and Mike Tyson, I'm going to learn a lot.
Both boxers now hope they can inspire each other to win their next fights, and for Mirovic, that means a world title fight on the Gold Coast on June 24. With coach Rob Barnes away with the touring Australian side, the North Stars haven't begun the season as well as they would have liked. After losing to Canberra in round 1, the North Stars got off to a great start against the Sydney Bears. The visitors fought back though in what was a hard-fought game in every aspect. Just ask the home side's defence, where even the goals themselves weren't safe. Forcing overtime, the Bears finished the stronger and claimed a 3-2 victory. From ice to field hockey, and in the Premier League, narrow wins for University and South, while Maitland and the Entrants had the better of things in their games. Rugby League and the Newcastle representative side to contest the country divisional championships includes several newcomers, including Raymond Terrace halfback Jamie Batty. Former country star Paul Skovgaard is also in the team to meet either Northern Rivers or Northern Division in their first game. In Group 21 Rugby League, meanwhile, big opening round wins for both Scone and Denman, which passed the half-century in beating Muswellbrook 56-12.
News of the injection to boost hospital bed numbers comes 3 weeks before the state budget is officially announced. $22 million has been allocated. Part of that will go to 5 of the region's hospitals.
It means a great deal because we've been working very hard to try and provide the service that is required under difficult circumstances.
10 new beds will go to the Royal, 6 each for the Mater and Maitland hospitals, while Belmont will receive 5. The biggest winner is the John Hunter, with 8 additional beds helping to reduce waiting time for patients, along with some extra funding for the state's busiest emergency department. With more than half of the 800 extra beds already allocated, the fight now begins for the remaining 322.
We'll be working hard and we have a great reputation of delivering outcomes, so I'm sure that will work for us.
And while you won't hear the hospitals complaining, the opposition argues the government has found a timely solution for a festering wound.
They're not new hospital beds, they're just old hospital beds being reopened by Bob Carr, and he's the man who closed them in the first place.
These are definitely new beds in the John Hunter, I can guarantee you that.
Without a win to his name this season, you could hardly blame the country captain for welcoming this rep game, given the hardships of his club back home.
It's a tough time at Newcastle, but I'm looking forward to the week, put it that way.
The incumbent state rake, though, feeling the heat from another direction, with Luke Pritter staking claims on Badiris' blue jumper after winning his Australian one.
He's got the jersey and I'm looking forward to the challenge there. It's up to me to get that back, so I've got to knuckle down and play well.
Cleared of kidney damage, Steve Simpson will join Badiris and now Matthew Gidley in camp tonight.
Yeah, well, it's always hard to get picked in, representative sides when the club side's not going well. So, but we've been lucky enough to get three Newcastle boys in the team now. So, hopefully we can play well and bring some confidence back to the Newcastle team.
It must have bottomed out after yesterday's loss to the Raiders. Prop Craig Smith ginger after playing through the pain of rib damage, only to learn today he now faces a possible 2-week punishment for this tackle.
I don't think there was anything in it at all.
The club undecided if they'll challenge the charge. It hopes to welcome back the likes of Josh Perry and David Siege this week, but they'll only fill holes now left by the injured.
It's not doom and gloom, you know what I mean? Yeah, we're in dire straits, we're busted across the park, but it's on again, isn't it? And it's on again for another 15, 16 weeks or whatever it is.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Ever since his death, questions have been raised about the way police reacted to Robert Preece firing shots at Senior Constable Craig Sutton and whether or not the 5-hour siege situation that ensued was unduly prolonged. Today, the state's police negotiation coordinator, Detective Senior Sergeant Andrew Lay, took to the stand, explaining the protocol for siege situations, in particular why police are reluctant to use third parties such as family members when negotiating. He said, "Part of our duty of care is to be mindful of putting people in danger. It would have been outside guidelines to send a member of the public into the situation. It was too dangerous." It wasn't until 5 hours after Senior Constable Sutton fired shots that police realised Mr Preece was dead in his vehicle. When asked if he thought more should have been done to check Mr Preece's condition, such as approaching the utility, Detective Senior Sergeant Lay said, "Officers couldn't have been sure that Mr Preece had died. They'd had no indication that he was hurt or wounded." Also taking the witness stand, Senior Lower Hunter Officer Chief Inspector Wayne Humphrey, who told the coroner there had been some issues between Mr Preece and Senior Constable Sutton prior to the June 2003 siege. Chief Inspector Humphrey said Sutton was concerned Mr Preece was a danger to him and other members of the public and other police. The inquest continues tomorrow. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
The Salvos are known for providing hot meals and hospitality, but this was no free lunch. Community leaders and business identities were invited to help launch the Red Shield appeal and possibly kick in some money as well to help raise $1.78 million locally.
We'd love to be able to say we're out of business, but we're not out of business. It increases every year, and because of the demands, the community get behind us.
Among them, local business identity Imelda Roach, having enjoyed a long association with the Salvos.
We had a company called Roach Fashions, and the young woman who joined us as our first employee was a member of the Salvation Army.
Cameron Pont is a member as well, but 4 years ago life was very different. It was in fact unbearable.
So I was living in a high-ace van, just travelling from car park to car park, heavily dependent on drugs, that sort of thing. Life certainly seemed like it was on a decline.
That was until he met the Salvos. Money raised from this appeal helps to provide food, blankets and counselling. It also enables the organisation to conduct employment training at a furniture warehouse and coffee shop. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Nearly 2,500 staff members have been in limbo since the University of Newcastle announced a budget deficit of $28 million more than 2 months ago. A big percentage of that workforce today simply wanted answers on their employment future.
Put the cards in the deck so we know what the way forward is.
But the cuts are going to be deep.
And that answer workers feared was delivered. As expected, Vice-Chancellor Professor Nick Saunders announced there would be job cuts, but what wasn't expected was the magnitude. In total, 450 positions will be axed across the Callaghan and Arimba campuses. The university says 150 to 180 academic positions would be cut, while up to 290 administration workers would be shed. In total, that's around 25% of staff. 300 people have already expressed interest in voluntary redundancies. The Vice-Chancellor said without the cuts, Newcastle Uni would continue to record annual deficits between $23 and $28 million. The university has promised the inevitable changes to courses would not affect enrolled students, but academic programs would be altered for students enrolling next year. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
It came as a shock, around 450 staff to go. Even the tertiary union president was surprised by the announcement.
This is much bigger than I'd expected.
Vice-Chancellor Nick Saunders today explained why such a dramatic decision had to be made.
If we were to do nothing, every year the university would be losing between $25 and $30 million a year, and obviously that's not sustainable.
Professor Saunders says he had to find savings of $30 million. Most of that will come from salaries. Compared to other Australian universities, Newcastle is overstaffed.
So we're spending somewhere between 63-65% of our income on staff, and the benchmark that the federal government uses as good practice is 50 to 60%.
But staff say the process and the job cuts have come far too quick.
He doesn't seem to be interested in stepping this out over any sort of timeline at all. He wants the reduction of about $29 million done immediately.
And there are concerns about the damage of this latest controversy on the university's reputation and profile, especially among prospective students. While current students won't be affected, future students should expect a smaller range of subject choice. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Given the amount of traffic off Newcastle in recent times, there was a rare sight off the coast today, just 3 coal ships waiting to load. But the lull won't last long, with up to a dozen ships expected within the next week to load 1.25 million tonnes of coal. Ironically, the industry has today been briefed on plans to speed up the transfer of coal from mines to the port. Railtrack manager David Marchant says the 5-year, $270 million project to upgrade lines will allow trains to travel faster and see additional track built.
It will enable some trains that have been shortened to actually go back to the 61 and 90 wagons. It will enable trains to come closer together.
Despite restrictions in place limiting the amount of coal that companies can export, PWCS says it's already on target to ship 84.3 million tonnes by July. For the 10 months ending in April, 65 million tonnes have already been shipped, which is 700,000 tonnes more than this time last year.
Given the injury list at the club, a suspension is the last thing it needs, and the 2-week penalty for Craig Smith seems a couple too many for the Knights.
If we don't feel we have a genuine argument, we normally accept those penalties when they come through, but I think he's reasonably hopeful we've got a reasonable case to argue that one.
Should the charge be upheld, Josh Perry would be rushed into the starting side to play the Roosters on Sunday in what will be his first game all season since a pre-season wrist injury.
It's been a very frustrating last couple of months, and now I'm definitely ready to go. Fittest I've been for a while, so if I have to play in the start lineup, it'll be good.
Ironically, Clint Newton has gone from the suspension list to the injured. The back rower has served the 12-week outing only to twinge a hamstring at training. It's just another element to a season that, at best, could be labelled testing. Jim Callanan, NBN News. Sydney was the stunning backdrop for what was a most un-netball-like launch. On the back of big Harley-Davidsons, team representatives got a new view of a city that at least one turned her back on this season. A 2-time premiership winner with the Swifts, Aussie rep Jane Altschwager surprised a few with her decision to head up Hunter's second campaign, but really it was simple.
In 2001 I was on the court, and 2004 I wasn't on the court, so there's a fair bit of difference between the 2 years, and for me to try and make a spot back in that Australian team and sustain it, I need to be on court.
Hunter has enjoyed a big pre-season as they hope to improve on a 5th placing in their inaugural year. Much of that time has been spent rebuilding a side that lost both captain Reagan Jackson and vice-captain Ali Tucker. But their new skipper has the same goals in mind.
I think we're certainly aiming for a finals berth, and I'd like to think that we can do pretty well once we get there.
Hunter will play their first game of the season in Canberra on Friday night, before returning to play in front of its hometown crowd for the first time this season against the Sydney Swifts on May 20.
Robert Preece, or Bob as he was known by family and friends, was shot dead in his hometown of Dungog after firing shots at a senior police officer during a siege that lasted more than 5 hours. A man who witnessed much of the incident, Bruce Carney, today took to the stand, telling the court that the siege seemed to drag on for too long. Mr Carney said that over the course of about an hour, police continually asked Mr Carney to throw his weapon out of the vehicle so that they could help him. Mr Carney did, however, say there were no initial attempts made by police to determine whether Mr Preece needed help, and that his mother was prevented from approaching her son despite her desperate attempts. It seemed like he really wanted his mother to come to the vehicle, that something was wrong. Mr Carney said if police had let Bob's mum talk to her son, the situation could have been resolved there and then. Also giving evidence, close friend and former work colleague Nigel Rumble told the court he pleaded with police negotiators to let him speak with Mr Preece, but was told this would only be used as a last resort. The State Coroner, John Abernathy, is expected to deliver his findings on Friday. Colleen West, NBN News.
If only some of our public hospitals looked this good. A state-of-the-art facility able to cater for 200 sick and abandoned animals.
Anything associated with the well-being of an animal and in the attempt to get that animal replaced in a good home will all be carried out on this site.
Bonnie the Beagle was today a guinea pig of sorts, and given the labyrinth of doors and hallways, a sniffer dog to get around could come in handy. One of the unique features of the shelter is a cat viewing area.
And then there's a cat lounge which is just behind me, which they can then sit and relate with the cat and make sure that it's the animal that they want to take home.
There's also a grooming area, consultation rooms, clinic, even a private hospital for those animals just in for treatment. The mod cons haven't been spared in the kennels either. All up, the huge facility cost $10 million to build, complete with an underground rainwater tank and ducted fresh air system. Bonnie and the other animals from the Ellamore Vale shelter will begin arriving at their new home on the 20th of May. 3 days later, the facility is open to the public. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
It's not your typical fundraiser with a car wash, Fate or Lamington Drive. These guys are taking the whole fundraising concept to new heights. Employees of Smorgon Steel have raised money in a unique and rather quirky way, salvaging coins from old cars at their Hexham recycling plant.
It was a commodity that was either going to go as scrap or was too damaged and just go out with the metal waste. And all the guys got together and thought it would be a great idea to support a local charity.
Remarkably, they've collected over $5,000. That money now funnelled into vital hearing test equipment for Kaleidoscope's Child Healthcare Centre at Lambton. Nurses say they've struggled with old archaic devices such as rattles and bells for too long in the hearing specialist clinic. The new equipment is making life much easier.
We have been able to purchase some the newer equipment, as in the PA5s, which is a much more child-friendly piece of equipment for us to screen the younger kids.
And with 1,060 children passing through the centre each year, Smorgon Steel thinks it's money well spent. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The New South Wales coroner today took submissions from the council assisting the family of the late Robert Preece, who was shot in the back after firing his shotgun at a senior constable outside a house in Dungog. Barrister Terry Healy today asked the coroner to consider several recommendations in his findings, including that family be allowed to play a greater role during siege situations in the future. He also asked that local health teams be called in to assist police and that specialist groups from the Hunter be used rather than police from Sydney in situations similar to that of June 1st, 2003. The counsel representing the then Senior Constable Craig Sutton, who fired at Mr Preece, today said his client acted absolutely properly and in the only way he could. Mr Daly said that despite being traumatised, Mr Sutton still managed to care for the safety of others. The coroner today criticised an order given to Senior Constable Craig Sutton to move his vehicle, which was in the line of fire, after he had already been shot at. Mr Abernethy heard the car was moved so it could act as a shield for police, as well as blocking off any escape route that could have been used by Mr Preece. I find the decision to do that quite incomprehensible, frankly. He also said, to send someone into a dangerous area, I can't understand it. The coroner will deliver his formal findings tomorrow. Colleen West, NBN News.
Port Stephens is one of the fastest growing areas in the region and expected to have an important role to play when the Lower Hunter strategy for future residential growth is released next month. There are suggestions the state government wants our coastal corridor to handle Sydney's population overflow. That could see up to 300,000 more people living here by 2035, and the Port Stephens Mayor says it's a proposition that needs thorough discussion.
If there's not appropriate consultation, the plan just won't work.
And while council town planners will have the job of ensuring appropriate development, Councillor Bowman warns local government can't foot the bill to accommodate more people.
I'm quite happy to have an increased population, but with that we need jobs, which is commercial infrastructure. And of course we need real infrastructure, better roads, schools, and everything else that the state government should provide.
150 town planners from across the state are attending the Shoal Bay Conference, which is also discussing new state government planning requirements, including the need for greater protection of the natural environment. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Breast cancer remains the biggest killer of Australian women from cancer, but researchers say they're on the brink of major discoveries. Newcastle Professor John Forbes' research team has secured around $750,000 in the funding boost.
We'll learn how eventually to cure all the breast cancers, but it's going to take time and it'll be a small group at a time, and this allows us to proceed towards those goals.
From breast cancer to melanoma research and work in making radiation therapy better for patients. The $2 million in funding will be spread across 5 hunter research teams, all striving for a cancer-free future. One project at the Mater Hospital could soon have very real benefits for patients, measuring radiation treatment.
Essentially what it allows us to do in both the research framework and in the clinical framework is deliver more accurate and reliable dose to patients from radiation.
Researchers have won $100,000 to conduct the work.
The Knights would do anything to flip their fortunes this season. Newcastle's very own judo Olympian Martin Kelly introduced some less than conventional defensive techniques at training this morning. Kelly's coaching cameo is about giving the Knights an edge in rolling their opponents and in turn speeding up their own play the ball. Something that's certain to help against the Roosters is having this man on deck. Craig Smith was in familiar but uncomfortable surroundings last night. The veteran front rower faced the NRL judiciary for the 11th time in his career. Last night he was even a touch surprised to be cleared of a head-slamming charge.
For me personally, to get a victory out of the judicial system that I've been in front of a couple of times, although a fair few years ago now, it was pleasing.
Smith's defence successfully argued he slammed the Canberra player's back, not his head. The only concern for Smith now is a painful rib cartilage injury.
But I managed to get through the latter part of last week's game, so I don't see any reason why I won't complete this week's game either.
Meantime, George Carmont was sitting on the fence today. He'll have to pass a fitness test on his hip before Sunday. Potentially of greater concern is tomorrow's City Country Origin match in Lismore. The Knights will be sweating on Denny Badiris, Matt Gidley and Steve Simpson, pulling through unscathed. In something of a twist, the Knights trio will be reunited with former Newcastle boy Anthony Tupou in the countryside, before then lining up against the Roosters prop on Sunday. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
It's deemed the worst in the state in terms of absenteeism. Newcastle High School admits it has a problem, and improving student attendance and ultimately their education has become a major priority.
My word. It's a constant effort on our part. The message we've been giving to parents is just that every day missed means that people aren't engaging with the education process, and there is a danger that literacy levels could fall.
Statistics obtained by the state opposition show that in 2003, Newcastle High students were away from school for a total of 30,994 days. Despite the media reports of a truancy crisis, Mr Merendorf says only a small number of the absences are truants. Most have parental permission.
The figures are quite misleading. They're more to do with total absentees across the whole student body for the whole year. rather than truancies. And that includes legitimate absences.
He says Newcastle High prides itself on accommodating most kids, setting up an outreach program for disadvantaged students who otherwise wouldn't go to school at all.
We draw from some of the lowest socio-economic areas in Newcastle, as well as some of the more well-off, and we have a number of programs to assist some quite disadvantaged kids, which sometimes skew the figures around a little bit.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
This is no happy homecoming for Edwina Lawson and Peter Elliott.
It's always very emotional to come back here, just because memories, and then obviously the terrible memories of the night that it happened.
It's nearly 6 months ago now. Edwina woke to the sound of what she thought was rain. It turned out to be an inferno outside her bedroom door, apparently sparked by a candle.
I got pulled out with a backdraft and thrown against the front door, and the flames engulfed me.
With the help of neighbours, Peter smashed the front window and pulled Edwina to safety.
It was a nightmare.
Edwina suffered burns to 20% of her body. This is her in intensive care at Sydney's Royal North Shore Hospital. Amazingly, her battered body has healed well and quickly. Motivated by their experience, the young couple has now become a firefighting team of sorts, joining Rotary to promote a smoke alarm campaign.
We've got 330 smoke detectors that we want to install in student accommodation around Newcastle, free of charge.
Edwina and Peter had a smoke alarm, but it wasn't working. They're urging young people to take up the offer.
Financially, health-wise, psychologically, it's all very damaging, and it's a hurdle that people shouldn't have to experience.
No one else's family or friends or anything like that.
Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
This may seem an unfair contest. The Royal New Zealand Air Force's Hercules up against Williamtown RAAF base's fighter jets, but there is a valid reason.
This is a workup for us going across to exercise Maple Flag in Canada, which is a major joint exercise which has large aircraft packages in the air, up to 80 or 90 aircraft airborne, so this is quite good for us.
The fighter evasion exercise this week has seen the Kiwi and Aussie crews test their skills anywhere between 75 metres off the ground up to an altitude of 1,500 metres. So has it been an easy week for the Hornet pilots of 77 Squadron?
It's certainly a different challenge to what we're used to. It's maybe a lot bigger, but it's a lot slower, and it can be down low level in the weeds where we're not used to fighting people.
The pilots of 76 Squadron Hawks have also been learning some valuable lessons about fast, low-level flight.
It offers us a chance to expose some of the other members of the unit to things they may never have seen before under pretty specific guidance from more senior members of the squadron.
While both sides say there was little love lost in this trans-Tasman contest of transport planes versus fighter jets, we'll leave the last word to Squadron leader Nick Osborne, who's now flown for both nations.
Well, it's always been good fun taking on the Kiwi-Aussie relationship anyway. Now, I've done a fair bit of it from the Kiwi side. Now it's just a little bit different being part of the Aussies.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
Unfamiliar teammates and a virtually unknown opposition, but some of the mystery surrounding the Jets World Club Challenge opener was taken away today. Newcastle United had a training road trip to the Central Coast Stadium, where they'll play the local side on Saturday. After playing overseas for years, star signing Ned Zellick has his way of doing things. The Jets will be hoping it's not too foreign for the club's other players.
We've been training every day, and every day things are improving tactically and also getting to know each other, so hopefully things click on Saturday.
He's a winner, he's a great leader, and the players have responded really well to have him on board.
With Zellick arriving in the country just days ago, the obvious question is, has the newest Jet been hit by jet lag?
I'm slowly starting to get to normal sleeping hours now and feeling better physically.
And what an opportunity for a young Broadmeadow player who carries a well-known Newcastle sporting name. 19-year-old Ben Kennedy will be the Jets' second-string keeper until the club's Croatian signing arrives. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
These planes have never been used in combat, they don't even fly. But the replica Messerschmitt and Spitfires represent the mammoth airborne struggles of World War II, and they've been rescued and restored in time for VE Day celebrations on Sunday.
Fighter World was given these aircraft as a gift. They had been left out in the elements for quite a while, and they were in a bad way. They were rotting into the ground.
Today, these planes stand side by side. 60 years ago, however, they were locked in battle, and it was the Spitfire to play a big part in the Allies' success in Europe and here as well. World War II pilot Wilf Gould flew with the RAAF in the Burma campaign and has fond memories of the Spitfire.
I suppose I'm biased. I was successful in combat with the Spit 8. I had confidence in it, and I thought that was a lovely plane.
Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
It's unlikely anyone will ever be charged with Robert Preece's death, but what might be of some comfort to his family is that the way police deal with siege situations in the future should be improved. Today, at the conclusion of his inquest, State Coroner John Abernathy made 4 recommendations. The first was prompted by the fact Senior Constable Craig Sutton, who shot Mr Preece, was not disarmed and taken from the scene for questioning at the first possible chance. The coroner also said there was very little consideration given to utilising a family member or doctor in negotiations with Mr Preece. That led him to recommend that New South Wales Police consider revising present practice in relation to third-party intervention during siege negotiations. Coroner Abernathy also cited a possible need for specialised police response groups to be based in the Hunter, and his final recommendation was in relation to the way police notified Mrs Preece of her son's death. The inquest spanned months, but this has been an ongoing concern for both the Preece family and Senior Constable Sutton for close to 2 years. Both were happy that Coroner John Abernathy was thorough.
My client accepts that the coroner has paid close attention to all the details of this matter, and she's heartened by the fact that there's been a full and open inquiry.
In a statement released through his counsel, Constable Sutton said he was greatly relieved that the inquiry had concluded. It had been a great strain on his family and on himself. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News. Back in the 1980s, primary and secondary industries such as wool, livestock sales and the output of steel and coal dominated the Hunter's economy. And while these industries remain important to the region in 2005, in terms of employment, those traditional jobs have declined in favour of employment in the tertiary sector. In 1987, goods producing was the largest employer with 67,500 jobs, but the knowledge-based industry has taken over as the top industry in 2005 with 72,600 jobs.
The knowledge-based industries, they reflect employment in areas such as health, education, business services and communication, and we've had quite strong trend growth in these areas.
So has this transformation been positive?
The region's economy has become much more diversified. We've now got multiple strings to the bow, so that if there is a downturn in any one of the sectors that make up our economy, it's less likely that the entire economy is going to feel the negative consequences.
And despite the news that Newcastle's second largest employer, the university, will shed 450 jobs, economists are not expecting a huge impact on overall employment rates in the knowledge-based sector. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Dane Tills has always walked tall, but after some months he'd rather forget. Finally, the dark times now seem behind him. While his career hung in limbo, today's news of a 3-year deal with the Canberra Raiders is like a second coming.
People sort of were taking me on who I was and not just what was portrayed out there. So obviously, yeah, there was a few clubs and I'm sure I've made the right decision going with Canberra.
His former club, Newcastle, which sacked Tills after he and 12 teammates spent that drink-filled morning at a Bathurst University dormitory, wanted him to return. However, the former young Kangaroo believes the best thing is to simply move on.
I feel I'd probably be playing my best football when I'm passionate about the club, and I feel that I probably wouldn't have the same passion playing here in Newcastle anymore.
His father Mick played with Canberra in their inaugural season, and if Dane follows suit in the top grade, he'll become the first son of a Raider to do so. However, the deal means little if it's not ratified by the NRL. The league struck Tills from the playing list after Bathurst, and he can only be re-registered with their say-so.
Clubs looked into that, and they obviously know that I'll be allowed to play in the NRL for next year.
To complete his carpentry apprenticeship later in the year, Tills will soon down tools again for the footy boots when he leaves for Canberra to begin life in league once again.
The job of a hairdresser often involves listening to a client's many and varied life stories, but Newcastle's Nick Penn will soon have a few extraordinary stories of his own. The 46-year-old father of 4 is embarking on his first 7-day cycling odyssey in China to raise money for multiple sclerosis research.
We've only done really day rides with my daughters Yasmin and Amber. They like to come on the rides with me, and we might do like 80-kilometre rides, but not day in, day out like this, and not at altitude.
Later this month, Nick will head to the southwest corner of China, the Chinese side of the Himalayas, and will pedal 430 kilometres through extremely steep terrain.
It is a bit daunting. We have triathletes on this ride, and we have professional tour guides. Yeah, I hope I can keep up.
He's been riding around the Hunter, clocking up thousands of kilometres to prepare for the challenge.
We ride around Lake Macquarie each Sunday, and I ride up Mount Sugarloaf on Monday, and I ride to work each day. So feeling reasonably confident, but we are at 2,440 metres above sea level in China.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The NRL season rolls into round 9 already. That means City Country Time and Lismore will be the hosts for the annual clash. Both teams arrive on the far north coast to go into camp. They've had hectic weeks doing coaching clinics, the rugby league rain train and visiting schools. And as you could imagine, has been a great shot in the arm for Country Rugby League. A quick look at both the teams. City's packing a heap of informed players, including Anthony Watmour, Jason Stevens and Hazem El Masri, who comes off a hat-trick for the Bulldogs last week. And for Country, well, they're fielding what is potentially a New South Wales front row with Riles, Badderas and Bailey. Barrett and Hill will give great experience in the halves, and have a look for a couple of young rookies, Anthony Tupou and also Ben Creagh, to have big matches. Now the Knights, they face the Roosters at Aussie Stadium on Sunday. They haven't beaten the Roosters in their last 6 clashes, but the Roosters are struggling with inconsistency themselves compared to recent years. Now the Knights have been decimated again with injuries. Kirk Reynoldsson was lost after last week's game, and Clint Newton, who served his 12-week suspension, is now out with a hamstring injury suffered at training. So those two adding to an already huge injury list. Now the Knights have conducted reports into their training surfaces, their facilities and other possible causes for this massive injury toll, but unfortunately it seems like bad luck is still the main factor. On the tips for round 9 and the Country Boys to get away with a tight one at the back end of the game. That's tonight, of course, don't miss it. On Saturday, 3 games. I like the Dragons, Panthers and the Sharks. 4 games on Sunday. The Broncos, Sea Eagles and the Cowboys to win. And of course, the Knights to cause an upset. Go Boys. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.
Despite first appearances, this is one tournament that's certainly no walk-up start. With one of the richest prize purses for the sport in the country, the limited field for the Newcastle gift couldn't be much stronger. National and Victorian champion Tony Hall is a past president of the World Croquet Federation, but he's only one that headlines this weekend. In a sport that pits women against the men, Liz Fleming will give the boys a real run for their money. The Queenslander won the British Ladies Championship last year and also has a New Zealand title to her name. Competition concludes on Sunday. A real change of pace. And the third round of the State Stadium Cross will be raced tomorrow night at Maitland Showground. Fast becoming the launch pad for Supercross stars of the future, Danny Anderson has a fine pedigree. His brother Craig has won countless national titles. However, he's out of the saddle at present, nursing broken toes. Round 9 in Newcastle Rugby League kicks off tonight at Belmont, with Lakes United hosting Maitland, while tomorrow Cessnock plays its first game at its new home ground that features a new 1,300-seat stadium. A top-of-the-table clash highlights the Newcastle and Hunter Rugby Union round, with the Tars taking on Hamilton, while in the NBN Soccer League round, the Olympic Broadmeadow Magic clash on Sunday will be a highlight.